here for a week now, so you've had a chance to be at all of our different bales as we've gone, but you haven't had a chance yet to hear about all of the different rooms here. So I thought we would start by, very innovative, by sharing a bit about the rooms, because it's very, very relevant to what you're going through at iLAB. So first of all, welcome, and it's really good to see you all, and we're going to have a super awesome session today. I have this recorder on because I don't know how many times I've done this, maybe 50 times, and we never recorded it, right? So this is the very first time ever that we're actually recording it. And I can take you way back like 15 years ago when we first got here. And seriously, like when we got here, the place was totally overgrown. There was no water in the pool. There was like none of that was out there. It was just like I mean, really, it was like we actually got to Bali, and it was myself, my wife, our 3 kids who were much, much younger at that point. And we basically, the reason we came out here was because we always had a dream of having our own like resort on a desert island, right? Or at least a paradise island. And I was in my early 30s at the time, and I'm like, well, we could either kind of wait another 15 years, or we can just go out to Bali and see what happens, right? And you probably noticed there is actually no resort real estate agent in Bali, because of the way the property market works. It's like no one's actually saying they're for sale. So we thought, well, if we come out, we'll give ourselves 5 years, we'll find a place. And then it was actually in the very first week, as we were trying to look to rent a place, and like Renata comes back, she goes, I can't find any place to rent here. So I'm like, well, I'll come with you, we'll have a look. And we go to one of the real estate agent offices, and I'm the kind of person that goes, looks in the corners, right? So she's looking at all the middle like ones up that are up there, and we're like looking through the whole folder, and they're like, and it looks like there's not a lot of good stuff to rent. So I go looking down in the corners, and right down in the very, very bottom corner, there's this picture of this like really rundown place, and it says a 13-bedroom home. And I go, that can't be a home, 13 bedrooms, let's go have a look. And she's like, are you kidding? This is like miles out. And that time there was no Bali Safari, there was no like, big highway. Like it was just like a little road, and it took like an hour and a half to get here from Sanur. And that's where the kids were going to school, right? So it's like totally impractical. And we come out and we come into this place, and it's like all just bushes and stuff. The whole place is closed down. Turns out that like the guy who owned the place, he ended up marrying some like Swedish or Danish woman who convinced him to turn his paddy field into a hotel, so she could bring all her friends out. But then they separated, and this is the story you heard from like the guy here. Is like they separated, and she went back to Europe, and he was like left with this place. And because he couldn't afford to keep it going, and no one wanted to come to it, he couldn't even call it a hotel anymore, because he didn't have a license to call it a hotel. So he just called it a home. So he had this 13-bedroom home that no one wanted to actually look after. So I'm like, brilliant! This place is awesome. And like Renata's like trader profile, right? So I'm saying, look at the potential, and she goes, I can't see anything. So we actually. So for the first 2 years, from like 2005 maybe, 2007, something like that. For the first 2 years, it was just our family home. I mean, we had our kids running around, we had the dogs, we had the whole place. We didn't actually have anyone stay over, except for the kids. They'd have like sleepovers. We'd have the mums and dads saying, oh, I heard that you're like, my kid's coming over for a sleepover. Do you have a room for them? And it's like, yeah, we have a room for them. They all have a room. And so anyway, so then that evolved obviously into what we now have, which is Vintage Villas, which turned into Entrepreneur Resorts. But like there's a lesson in that, right? Which is like, even before you think you can afford the dream, go for it, right? And we actually did a really, really good deal with this place when we got here, which is a whole different story. But one of the most interesting things was that I had the vision already back then, which was to take all of the energies and things that I knew about and actually really kind of like honor whatever the spaces that we're in. And because we're in Bali, it's the Hindu culture, let's actually make sure that every room was then actually named after one of the Hindu gods, and it creates this story. And so I found out all about the whole Hindu religion, how the whole thing works, and it's really more of a philosophy than a religion. And I'm going to share a little bit with you, because you're all actually in one of these different rooms, or maybe the ones on the other side. So first of all, hands up who's in one of the rooms over here. Anyone over this side? Anybody? Nobody? No? Oh, how interesting. You were there? Then you got moved. Okay, so there's always a reason you end up in a place, and there's always a reason if you end up getting moved that you get moved. It's just one of those weird things that happens in this place, right? This place is magic. And so this here is the first of 3 blocks that go around in a cycle with water at the beginning and end of every block. And these 3 blocks link to something called the Trimurti, which are the 3 great ones. And the 3 great ones are basically the 3 gods that then cascade into all the thousands of gods in the Hindu religion. And they all are about the beginning, the middle, and the end of time. And so if you actually start looking at each of those and realize that there's this like beautiful philosophy, but we're all going through the same cycle of time as well. So there are 2 at the top here. So you've got the top ones, which are basically like where each of the 3 gods and their female counterparts actually are, and there's huge lessons in this. So you've got like the guy who is the god of new beginnings, or the guy who's the god of all beginnings. That's the start of all things, and his name is Brahma. And Brahma basically, he's there's an interesting story about Brahma, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it in a moment, because Brahma basically is married to a woman called Saraswati, who's the goddess. And Saraswati is everywhere, all around Bali, right? Like all of these are Saraswatis, right, that you'll see. Saraswati's always got like a swan, she's always got like music, she's always got like a lotus leaf. And the reason she's got all these different things is because what the Hindus believe that you need to have to start something new is divine knowledge, and she is the goddess of divine knowledge. And so the whole concept of divine knowledge is not like book knowledge, it's not like just knowing lots of stuff, it's really wisdom, and it's more importantly knowing what to keep and what to leave. And so like the swan is the symbol, because with the swan it can take water and milk in its mouth and split them up, and so it knows what to keep, what to leave. And in the beginning of anything new, if you're going to start something new, and many of you are starting something new, you've got to know what to keep and also what to leave. You need to know both. It's not a matter of just saying I'm going to throw it all out and start again. And it's also not a matter of basically saying I'm going to take it all with me, because most of the time what we do is we take all the wrong stuff and we end up basically like throwing away all the good stuff, right? So just be really, really aware. In the same way that if I go out and I get like one of these things, right, which is what is it, the iPhone 10 or whatever. Oops, iPhone 10. And so the iPhone 10 is obviously got some bits in it that were there in the iPhone 8, and it's got some other bits which aren't in it anymore. So fundamentally, they stopped and they said, what would we want to keep? What do we want to leave? So in exactly the same thing, you can have like, you know, JSON 3.0. Like, and what does JSON 4.0 look like? Well, it includes some of what was in JSON 3.0 and includes some that's not there anymore. And your decisions of what to keep and what to leave is going to make all the difference in terms of what your success is, right? So super duper important that the two of those link up together. Brahma like was out there basically procreating all over the place, because that's what he does. He's like new beginnings, right? So he's creating all these new beginnings everywhere. So he's like a naughty guy, and the Saraswati basically gave him basically balance. And so if you don't have that, you're going to end up doing all the wrong stuff, starting all the wrong things, as opposed to just saying, wait, what am I actually holding on to? What am I leaving? So we're going to talk about that when we're inside. Now, what's interesting is how these gods then actually create themselves into earthly gods, because that's the concept of basically starting something new from wisdom. But down below, we then got the male and we've got the female manifestation of that on the planet. So you've got the guy on this side over here, his name's Krishna. So Krishna is the blue god. He's like the avatar god. So that's like the male version of starting something new. So if you've watched like James Cameron's Avatar, right? Avatar is based on Krishna, the idea that we ourselves are simply in a virtual reality where we are seeing spirit through our eyes, and that we think we're real but we're not real, right? So it's basically the whole illusion is about Krishna. And Krishna shows up in different avatars. He can show up in any form he wants to. So Krishna has shown up as Buddha, Krishna has showed up as Jesus, Krishna, and these were all predicted way back 5,000 years ago. This is how Krishna will show up. Apparently the next time he shows up, he's going to be a turtle. So it's like there's a different thing that he shows up with every time, which is like the manifestation of the time. So that whole concept, which is that when you start something new, you actually have to step into a new identity to do it. You can't be the old identity. That's what Krishna is all about. The interesting story is the one next to it, and usually would have someone staying at that place, but obviously, was anyone down at that one before you got moved at the far end? No, no one here? Interesting. This is actually something that I would have expected to have at least a number of you in, maybe because too many of you should have been in there, that no one's in there, but that's Durga, right? Durga is the female manifestation of something new, and she is like the warrior goddess, okay? Like seriously, like Durga, like if you hear the story of, I'm going to tell you a story of Durga, right? So here's the story of Durga. So basically, long time ago, and this is all in the Mahabharata, you can read about this, there was a really, really mean guy called Karna. And Karna basically, he could turn himself into anything, right? So he was like defeating all the other gods. And he's like, I'm just gonna come and just put like 10,000 years of like doom on the planet. And of course the gods were not happy about this, because like, well, it's our planet too, so that's not very fair. So they're like, come on, like, let's just defeat this guy. But every time they tried to defeat him, he was just too powerful, he could turn into anything, and so he was just, like, they were eventually all defeated. And they were just sitting down, like feeling sorry for themselves, thinking, this is really, really bad. All of us can't beat this bad dude. What are we gonna do? And one of them had a really good idea. It's like, well, why don't we come up with a new god, which is even more powerful than us? But let's make this new god so disarming, so much like that you'd never think that he'd be able to actually, it's like, why make it a she? Like, let's make it a she, let's make her really sexy, right? Let's make her so awesome that he falls in love with her, and then she can go and defeat him. And so they're like, brilliant idea. So they end up making this amazing Durga, right? And she's like, hello boys. And they're like, wow, you're beautiful, right? You're gorgeous. And they're like, no, come on, like, let's get like focus. And like, yeah, okay, all right, okay, here's all our weapons. And gives them all the weapons, right? So she's now got all these weapons that she's got. And she's like, right, into battle. So she's going to battle. And of course, Karna sees her coming a mile away. And she goes, what do you think you're doing, right? And so he's in battle, and she's like, or she loses all of her stuff, and she's like, no more nothing. She's totally defenseless, or so he thinks. And then that's when she turns on the Durga charm, right? That's when she goes, oh no, poor me, look at me, I'm so helpless. Oh no, I have to run away. You're gonna hit me, you're a terrible person. And he's there, and he's like half like lion and half bull, and he's like, I'm gonna just come eat you. And she's like, no, please don't help me. I'm like, quick, I have to run away. I can't in my high heels. So she's like doing all this stuff, right? And so this guy, he's galloping towards her, and then she goes, oh, I tripped, and she falls over. And he goes and just jumps right on top to kill her. And at that point she goes, flip, and goes around, and she has a little dagger, which is the only thing is actually her little weapon. And she goes like this, and it goes, douche, and it's the energy or the weight of the opponent which actually kills it, right? And it's like just a little quick, and that was all it takes. And it's like, right? So anyway, so if you know, only a few guys here, but if you're married and you know what that feels like, if you so that. But by the way, that female energy is actually how all the new startups are really beating all the big guys today, right? They're actually coming with that whole thing, which is like, I don't need to pretend I'm big. I don't need to position myself as something I'm not. I don't need to fake it to make it. I'm basically already going to be that one that's just simply looking and saying, well, that's going to fall anyway, right? And we just have to take our little like pin and click, and that's all it takes, right? So keep that in mind, because at the very beginning of something, most of us aren't using that energy, that divine energy, that wisdom that's already there. Now let's take that, and we're going to move over to here, right? This here, hands up anyone over this side? Okay, right, so here, this is the biggest lesson that the Western world has forgotten, because the Western world has got a number of different books that actually make up all the main religions, whether you take the Quran, whether you take the Bible, where it's all about the beginning of times and the end of times. And they're kind of missing the middle bit. This is about the middle bit. So this is not about starting something like the beginnings, it's not about the end, it's about preservation, it's about sustainability, it's about the middle bit. So we're all waking up to sustainability now. And what you've got at the top is you've got Vishnu, who is basically the god of sustainability, right? He's the god of keeping things going. He's a cow god. Like if you actually go around Bali, you'll see like all these sheds in the paddy fields with a cow. Why is the cow in there? It's because the cow is a symbol of wealth. Because if you can afford a cow, then you're pretty much saying we're set, right? Because the cow's going to give you milk, the cow's going to till the fields, the cow's going to give you more cows, the cow's going to give you meat, the cow's going to give you all of this stuff, which basically means that it just keeps on giving. And so from Vishnu, he's married to Lakshmi, and Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth. So a lot of people in the West think that wealth is what you need to start with. You're going to need money before you start, or it's the end. It's like, I'll exit and I'll get the money, as opposed to actually money being what sustains things. It's like, this is exactly what Walt Disney says. He says, I don't make films to make money, I make money to make films. It's like the only reason to have the money is to water the garden. And so if you don't have a garden worth keeping, if you're so busy trying to exit your garden, then don't ever expect anyone to want to show up, right? Don't expect the money to ever flow. But because where we put our money today is not on the companies where the person wants to exit. It's not on the company that's only going to be there for tomorrow. We're putting money in the companies that we actually want to see around in 10 or 20 or 30 years' time, right? So there's a whole different sense of longevity that's showing up in the world today, which actually is over here. And the most interesting thing is that they end up showing up down on the ground floor as Rama and Sita. And Rama and Sita, like the Hindu culture is the only culture that has two books, because the Mahabharata is all about the beginning and end of times, and then the Ramayana is the love story. And this is the love story. This is basically, so if you actually watch any of the big shows here in Bali, you'll see like the monkeys all running around, and you'll see like almost 90% of them are about Ramayana, not about Mahabharata. And it's about basically the whole Romeo and Juliet story, where Rama ends up with Sita, getting like whisked away to another country. He's got to go basically fight for her return, and the whole thing kind of plays out. And in every village, it's very interesting. Like here we have Medahan. Medahan has got about 100 families. Every village is actually limited to about 100 families, which is called a banjar. And within that banjar, you have one chief. Everyone knows everybody. And basically, the whole sense of it is that everyone looks after each other. There's a really sense of belonging. There's a sense of family. And so you've got this already happening here in Bali, which is why even the concept of poverty doesn't really exist here. Even though there may be many people who aren't earning a lot of money, poverty is not measured in money. It's measured in your ability to have or not have connections, which is much more prevalent in the West. So this whole element of like, as you're growing up, your son, your daughter, you want them to have models, which is like the male, the female, right? Which is very, very different from in the West, where they've got totally different models. I mean, this is not a religious comment at all, but basically if I was to read a book, which is about a man and a woman and they fall in love and he goes out looking for her and dedicates his life to her and then they get together. Or read another one which is about a dude with like 12 guys that basically hang out with him and a virgin woman who ends up having a baby. I'd be really confused as to which one is the right model for society, right? But we are living in a world today where we're having to rethink what's our business. Because if you think your business is basically a machine for making money, you die. But if you think your business is a family, where you're thinking the people that I'm actually looking after, that my customers, I mean, I would look after them even if they paid me nothing, right? If you love them that much, because at the end of the day, you know, people don't pay you for what you love, right? They pay you for what they love. And if you aren't already caring about their problem more than they are, and actually caring about solving their problem more than they do, then you're never going to actually be able to build a business. So this whole aspect of this chunk here is a lesson where so many of us are trying to just rush out upon what we're doing, and we're taking our spirit with it and thinking by we leave a machine behind, then we'll just automatically make it all happen, it will be fine. Never happen, right? Because people will actually move out of it because it's not about the machine, it's about your spirit and your heart and who you are and where you are as well. So this here is the middle bit, right? And that then leads to the final bit over here, which is actually now on one level broken up. Hands up, anyone on this side over here? Anyone? Okay, a few over here as well. Yeah, okay. All right, yeah, all of these, right? 2 and 2, right? So this is completion. Completion is also destruction. It's one of the most important things. Because when I'm like looking at your presentations and I'm reading where you're at, sometimes we're so stuck in the past as to what we were doing or what was stopping us or the reasons that we're having a tough time, as opposed to just starting from where we are and moving forward. And this is all about destruction, completion as the necessary part of nature that most of the time we forget about because we're all holding on to too much. So this is now the most powerful of the three gods of the Trimurti is Shiva. So Shiva is the god of destruction, right? He's the guy that basically just says enough's enough and we're moving on. And the real power of this is that his wife is Parvati, who is the goddess of love. Now, think about that. It's like love. Like you think maybe love shouldn't be in the middle. It's like, no, wealth is in the middle because that's what actually allows you to sustain it. Love is to finish things off. So if you're complaining about anything, like let's imagine you have someone who's a partner in your business or you've got someone who's in your team and they're just not doing the right job and I wish that person would be doing a better job, blah, 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 this kind of stuff. Well, there's only one reason that you'd be holding on to them, which is you don't love them enough. I mean, really, it's like you're actually saying, I'd much rather they work for a boss that's complaining about them than to let them go so they can actually go find a boss that loves them, right? Because I complain about them, but I'm their boss, right? So I'll just continue to put them through misery by having a boss that actually doesn't respect them and just complains about them, right? And you think, why would I do that to somebody, right? If you actually truly love them, and most of the time we're doing it because we think we love them. We're thinking, well, I can't just let them go because then they won't have a salary and then I won't be looking after them anymore. So it's like my job to look after them. That's not love, that's ego, right? That's you thinking you know better, but it's not serving them. So when you start thinking about it that way, that if you've got a customer that you're complaining about, it's like, I wish I did not have that customer, right? And you're still taking their money, the only reason you're not letting go is you don't love them enough for them to actually go find a company that actually cares enough about them to actually make the most of that money. So when you start thinking of that, it's like, holy cow, everything I'm complaining about it just because I don't love those things I'm complaining about enough to let them go. What if I just let them all go? What would then happen? And the most powerful thing is that the biggest thing that actually we kind of like are upset about or complain about or worry about is ourselves, it's our past self. It's like the fact that I'm not doing what I really want to be doing today, but how can I help that because I have to go do this because I've got this obligation to do this, or like I'd much rather go do that, but I can't because, well, the only reason you're not doing all that stuff, you don't love yourself enough. Because you're still at the point which is kind of like, yeah, but I'd rather myself go through misery where I complain about my own life than actually say, why would I put myself through that? I mean, if that was your son or your daughter that you're putting through that same thing, would you actually say to them, keep on going, keep doing that? Or would you actually say, wait, just out of it, just quit that, don't have any toxic thoughts in your life? And so this is really interesting because you think Shiva is the god of destruction, must be some bad guy, but he's like the best guy out there because he's actually the one who says enough is enough, let's just move on, right? So for many of us, that's what we need to do because we're so stuck on all the reasons we can't get stuff going. And it's okay to not have confidence, it's okay to feel that things are tough, but to actually make that your ruling modus operandi as to why you're not doing things, that's not okay, right? That means you're actually not loving yourself enough to say, wait a minute, my future self is too important for me to be holding that person back, right? So I'm just going to let it go and let that person show up, right? So this here, Shiva, is now linked to Parvati, and they're then linked to two sons, and these two sons are the two ways that you actually achieve this, that you actually achieve just the enough's enough, let's move on, without having to go through years of counseling to actually figure it out. You got, first of all, the guy here, and this guy here, Kartika, is the god of war, right? He's just like chop, right, over, right? That's it, right? Just war, just like don't like, and people are like, war is bad. Not necessarily if it clears out all the bad, right? And so what's interesting is that there's actually only one religion in the world today that's actually an operating religion that has a god of war, which is the Hindu religion. And India is the only country in all of the modernized world that actually is the only country that's never had a war in 5,000 years on its own soil. Pretty amazing, right? It's like you've never had a war in India. So you've got this really interesting kind of like thing where if you embrace the thing that you actually fear most, it actually allows you to then actually clear yourself out from all the things that you wouldn't want to do otherwise. And the most interesting story is this one here. This guy, the elephant god. This is Ganesha. I want to tell you the Ganesha story because it's kind of hilarious, right? And when I read this story, I was like, really? Is that really the story? So Ganesha actually, all seen the elephant god, right? And he's actually one of the most revered god, both in India, but also here in Bali as well. But the story of Ganesha, this is how it goes. He actually had a normal head when he was younger, right? So like the story goes that Shiva was like one day off for a walk, and he goes for these long walks for over thousands of years, right? Because he's almighty, so he can do that. So he like turns to Parvati, says, "Hey, Parvati, I'm off for a walk," and off he goes. And Parvati like finds out after he's gone that she's actually pregnant, right? So she's gonna have a second son, and she's like, "Oh, well, my husband's gone. Well, I'll just have the son anyway." So there he has his son, calls it Ganesha. So there's Ganesha every day. This goes on for quite a long time. Every day when she goes for a shower, in order for her modesty to be protected, she would put Ganesha at the door to make sure no one can come in when she's at the shower. Now, why an almighty goddess cannot afford a lock, I don't know, but basically she couldn't. So here's Ganesha just standing at the door every day, right? So this goes on for thousands of years, and he's still a boy somehow. But anyway, so then one day Shiva comes back, right? And Shiva like comes back from his roam, and there's Ganesha, and Ganesha never met his father, didn't know about his father, right? And so he's standing there, and he goes, "Oh, boy, out the way!" And he's like, "No, sorry, sir, no, boy, out the way." And he goes, "No, and he goes, "If you don't get out of the way, I'm going to chop your head off." And he goes, "No, because you see, like chop his head off." And then he goes in, right? And then inside the shower, there's Parvati having a shower. So like, "Oh, Shiva, you're back." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "What happened to Ganesha?" And he says, "Who? Ganesha, the boy at the door, your son." "That was my son?" Yeah. "Oh, sorry." She goes, "What? You chopped his head off?" He's like, "Seriously, you go away for 1,000 years and you come back and chop your son's head off? That's ridiculous. Go fix it." And he goes, "What?" He goes, "Go fix it. I just got home. Just go sort it out." So he goes out, like looks around, like first thing he finds is an elephant. And he's like, "Oh, you'll do." Chop, comes back, sticks on the head, right? So again, if you're married and you're the wife, like that's a lesson, right? You have to be more specific, right? It's like, so basically that's how Ganesha ends up with his elephant head, right? It's like, well, that'll fix it, done. It's like, that's it. It's like, that's how Shiva thinks. It's like no time for anything else. Just get it done and do it, right? And the reason I think this is such a powerful thing, and he, by the way, the son of the god of destruction is the god of new beginnings. I mean, how cool is that, right? Is that it's actually what allows to emerge out of completion is a new beginning. But it's like, and actually that's the end. That's done, finished. Some of you are 1 week into this journey and you still have to do the chop. It's like, enough's enough. All right, let's move on. Come on, like now's the time to move on. And for some of us, the thing that's stopping us from moving on is actually the biggest liability we have, which is our conscious monkey brain, right? It's the one that's constantly saying, but what if this and what if that, and this is not possible and that's not possible. And for some of us, we can tame that mind and we can go, it's okay, we're gonna do it anyway. But for some of you, you're gonna figure out, I can't actually do it. It's like, it's too loud, right? So what do you need to do? Chop, just chop your head off. Because like you could leave here with a Ganesha head, right? You could say, like, I'm not even listening to that head anymore, right? I've got a whole new head, right? It's like if you woke up as Richard Branson today, you'd have a whole new head, right? It's like, I'm just gonna think differently. And you'll go back and people will look at you and go, you're weird. What happened to you, right? It's like, you're changed, right? Yeah, but you're like, hey, I like my head, right? It's an elephant, so what, right? It's like, what's the big deal, right? And you just keep on going anyway. But for some of us, it actually takes that lobotomy, right? Where you actually got to basically just change your brain. So keep that in mind, that your heart and your spirit are far more powerful than your brain ever is. But our brain just gets in the way so much of the time. And Ganesha basically is the whole idea. You can have an elephant head and you can begin anything you want, right? As long as you're not actually, again, just focusing on your vanity and your ego and what your friends are gonna think. And that's the real power of this story. And as you notice, like there's all these different statues everywhere. Every one of them has a story, right? It's all like stories hidden in plain sight. And I think that's the real power, is like exactly what it is when we're going through life as well. We'll come back to the same place and going, oh, that was there all along. If I'd only just like had the eyes to see from before. Okay. So I wanted to just come over this spot as well, because before we go in, I want to order collect a bit of a flower, right? But I want to tell you a bit of a story about the flower before we go in. I want to tell you a story about my most favorite statue. We're talking about different statues, right? And this statue, which I'm going to share with you, if you actually look over this side here, you see this really, really big statue here. This guy. Well, this is not actually the favorite statue. The favorite statue is this little guy down here, which they've actually cleared up. They've cleared a lot of the stuff here, but on the very first day when we got here and we decided to take on Vision Villas, this was like a cornerstone. We had a little ceremony, right? And so I was there with my kids, like 7 years old, and we put this little guy down here. And over time, he just totally got overgrown. In fact, last time I was here, like last month, you could hardly even see him. So they've kind of cleared it up a little bit. And you can see now just how much this has grown. They cleared this whole thing out about 3 years ago, and you can see it going right up to the top now. And the funny story about this, and the reason this big guy is here, is when we actually put him here, there's a story behind him I'll share in a moment, but when we put him here and he got overgrown, I remember it was 2014 when I said, okay, I'm gonna go out and do my bestseller book and all this kind of stuff in New York, and I started my YouTube channel, and the very first video I did with this guy, right, where I explained a bit about who he was and why he was here. And then I went away for 2 or 3 months to America, and then I came back. And when I came back, we had an iLAB group, and I go, I want to tell the story of my little statue. And I came down, and he was gone. It was just totally gone. And all of this was gone. They'd all been cleared. And I was like, what happened? And what had happened was that they had some new gardener who'd come in, who said, oh, look at all this rubbish, let's get rid of it. And with all this stuff off, he'd taken it all out, and somehow the guy got caught up here as well. So he was gone, and I was like, what? This is ridiculous. And here I was talking about letting go, and I was so I'm so upset. So then they said, oh, no worries, we'll work it out. And so they brought this big guy in. And of course, I'm like, not the same. He's not the same little guy, right? So he was here. And this is the Weeping Buddha, right? And the whole idea of the Weeping Buddha is that he's actually closing all his senses, right? So he's basically getting from sight to insight. He's closing his eyes, his ears, his nose, his mouth, everything. So that basically he's tuning in to actually the real senses of who he is. And so I was thinking, after about a month or two, I was like, oh, well, obviously, my little friend, he's off somewhere in the world. So I wish him all the best. And I let it go. Within 3 days of letting him go, he shows up again. I'm like, what the hell? How did this statue move all the way back here? I've heard of animals and dogs and things come back to the home, but how does a statue do that, right? And then they said, oh, no. What happened was they were clearing out the pond. And as they were clearing out the pond, he was in the pond, right? Oh. So obviously what had happened is a month or two earlier, whoever was the gardener who'd taken all this stuff out hadn't even bothered to take it around. He just dragged it through the pond to take it out. And the little guy was like, I'm not leaving yet, and he jumped into the pond and stayed there. And then when I was like, okay, I'm gonna let you go now, then he shows up again. So that whole thing about if you love something enough, let it go, it always shows up again, right? So this magic happens in this place all the time, these kind of things. So this whole idea of actually tuning into what's on the inside, I think that this is, for me, what iLAB's all about. It's why we created iLAB, it's why you're here, is when you're in nature, you've all had this experience, even within 1 week of being in Bali, and you don't have all the noise and the static of a city, you don't have all the kind of busyness, you get to tune in to yourself, right? You get to tune in to actually what's your real intuition and what is it that is your truth. And it's so easy to forget that, right? And this is about, this brings me from the story of the statue to the story of this tree. This is my favorite tree as well, which is why we put the statue here, because every single culture out there every ancient culture has got a tree of life. And the tree of life is the whole basic concept that we're all connected in some way. What's really interesting about this is that most of us have not ever really got the real clear understanding of what knowledge is and how knowledge relates to wisdom. A lot of us, we're out there looking for more knowledge all the time. And the problem with that is that we're living in a world of too much information already. And if you're out just looking for more knowledge, you could come to iLAB and you could be here and you could be like, all right, well, I just need to find out more stuff. Like, how do I do my online strategy? Or how do I, launch into a new market? And what happens is, if you think about all information as this tree, right? And all of us connected as this tree. At the beginning of every different culture, it's really simple. It's the trunk. So at the very beginning of every culture, and you can go back and look at this across, and this is why so many people are now interested in history. You can look across, whether it's in Egypt, whether it's in, South America, like in China, and there was always in every village, a wise person, wise man, wise woman, who knew everything. So why does my body work this way? Oh, because of this reason. Why does the stars work that way? For exactly the same reason. Why is the nature? Everything was connected. And it was yep, that makes sense. You could be like a kid just going, I get it. I get this whole thing, right? But then it gets to a point where complexity sits in, right? Which is where knowledge shows up, where there's more information to know. And so now the wise man's going, yeah, you know what? I can't just keep on talking about all this body stuff because there's too much to know about the body. So I tell you what, you focus at the head, I'll focus at the rest of the body. Okay, fair enough, right? So now you've got someone who's focusing at the head, and then the person focusing at the head, and it's like a branch who actually opens up. And then the branch opens up, and the guy who's the head doctor is like, you know what? It's not that easy because some of it's like psychological stuff and some of it's like brain surgery. So you be the brain surgeon and I'll be the psychologist. And so then it breaks up again. And then it continues like, well, it's more sociology, is totally different from, you know, brain science and mental health. So that's two again. And so separate. And then we end up getting born into the separation where now we have an education system which is like, look, let's take you down a branch. You have a branch of knowledge and you learn about that. And we get more and more separate until we become a leaf at the very end of the tree, or we fall off, right? And so we're wondering why we're so separate. If you come here to iLAB with that thought process, which is I've got to get more knowledge. So if I can only figure out how can I do my digital marketing? So should I use Facebook or should I use LinkedIn? Well, I think I should use Facebook. Well, you want to do it on mobile or do you want to do it on desktop? It's like, really makes a difference? Yeah, it does. Okay, I'll do mobile, right? Well, if you're going to do it on mobile, then you're going to actually lead people to your app or you're going to lead them to your mobile site. Well, it's going to be an app. It's going to be Android. It's going to be app. Before you know it, you've got so much stuff. It's like, oh my God. And you can leave here with even more stuff to do than you got. And this is the difference of a man of knowledge, the more he knows, the more he thinks he knows. The man of wisdom, the more he knows how much he doesn't know. It's like you realize, like, holy cow, like this is impossible. Until you realize that iLAB is barley backwards, right? You just turn around and you say, well, maybe my job here is not to be moving outwards and becoming more separate. Maybe my job is to move inwards. Because if I am wanting to do digital marketing and I've got a health business and I know someone else who's also got a health business who's doing digital marketing really, really well, I'll just connect with them because we've both got the same purpose. And now I can use their skill sets and they can use, you know, my connections. And then suddenly you know, it becomes stronger, right? And it's like, well, wait, if we're both going to be doing that together and there's someone else out there who already is looking for purpose in their life and they want to get fit, well, then we can actually trade that for all of their knowledge. And then you connect up to this one over here. And as time goes on, two things happen. First of all, you get more and more close and close to the trunk. But the second thing is you also start to realize that every new connection is so much more sacred. I mean, like every connection is like a doorway to an entirely new universe that you're connecting into as well. And you don't need to know all of it. You just need to get connected. And so as you start doing that, you get further and further down towards the trunk again. And this is where wisdom sits. Wisdom's the opposite of knowledge. And so iLAB's all about the wisdom, and it's about the knowing that you don't need to know it all. You just need to actually have that absolute clarity on yourself. Self-awareness leads to self-mastery, leads to self-expression. And it's all about the self and how we actually so often are distracting ourselves with businesses that are taking us further away from who we're actually meant to be. So I want everyone to do this. I want everyone to find a space somewhere around this tree. It could be over here. This is actually growing higher now. It could be over this side where it's easier to reach. And I want you to find a spot where you could think of the spot as if when you first arrived here 1 week ago, right? So some of us are feeling like more separate. Some of us are feeling very separate. Some of us are right out in the branches. Some of us, whatever it is where you feel, well, that's pretty much where in the tree I could see myself a week ago. Find a spot and just put your hand on it so we can see where everyone was just 1 week ago, all right? All right. Everyone got yourself a spot? Got a spot as well. All right, okay. So just a few things now that you got yourself a spot, right? The first one is you'll notice, even if you think that you're separate, we're all already connected. I mean, that's what happens when you put a tree in the middle of it, right? It's like we're all already connected, and most of us just forget that because we're all looking outwards. So we didn't even notice who else was connected to us in the same situation. But that's the first thing, right? The second thing is we're all obviously in different places as well, right? So what I want you to do now is to think, okay, it's been a week, it's not a long time, and there's a sense in some way or other that things have moved, right? Things have moved in your life. For some of you, you've moved inwards, some might have moved outwards, right? Like wherever you've actually felt that you've moved in the last week, go to that new place and basically put like a hand on that new spot. Where would you say you are now? And if you've got to get close to each other, that's okay too. And by the way, you notice that like the majority or pretty much everyone has moved inwards. And if you're feeling closer to some people here at iLAB within a week than you even do to some of your neighbors, that you've actually got more connected, now you know why, right? It's not just because you got closer to them, it's because you all got closer to wisdom, right? You all got closer to truth. And that then naturally means that we're closer to each other as well, right? And it feels better because then you're actually already feeling more connected because of that as well. But here's the good news. We did all this without even knowing about the tree. I'd like you to think in a year's time, if you were to come back here in 2019 and you were able to say, I get to choose where on the tree I'm going to be, right? Like how much I'm actually going to be connected to wisdom or how much I'm going to be separate, but it's your choice now. And you can actually choose a new part of this tree, which by the way, the tree will remember. go to that new spot of wherever you want it to be in a year's time and put both hands on that spot, wherever that is. You might need to reach around people. Everyone got a new spot? All right, everyone's still trying. Okay, so this is what tree hugging is.
Yay.
And by the way, this tree has, I mean, every single time that I have been here at iLAB, which is the vast majority of them, we have done this, which means that you're getting the imprint of all of those hundreds of other people that have been through iLAB that have now gone out there and developed their journey, right? That we're all connected in this together. And this tree remembers all of it, right? And is giving you the energy of the planet at the same time as you're giving energy back as well. So whenever you're actually at a low point of confidence or you think you're on your own, remember this magic moment. I mean, just remember being here at this very moment in Bali with our tree and with our little man, sitting just in insight, feeling and hearing all of this. And just know that whatever it is that you're up to, whatever you're gonna do, everything's gonna be okay. It's all gonna work out. That's awesome. Give yourself a little message to the tree, whatever it is. And then you can let go of the tree and go give a few people a big hug. Yay. And say thank you. All right, Jason.
All right.
All right, of course.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bring it in.
Who haven't I given a hug to?
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
All right. Now, before we go in, grab a flower from, you could be from like a red flower from in there or a white flower from over there, but just grab whatever flower takes your fancy and then bring it back into the room and we'll head back inside. These three are linked to the Orion's belt.